Alrighty, we are picking up with Magic Tree House number 15, Viking Ships at Sunrise by Mary Pope Osborne. We left off ready to start chapter 6 today, and we will find out what's going on with Jack and Annie and the Vikings. So chapter 6 is called The Vikings Are Coming, and anytime there are pictures, I will make sure I show them to you so you can see what's going on. Alright. Annie! Cried Jack. Vikings! Annie looked out the treehouse window. Vikings? They're headed straight for the island, said Jack. He turned back to the stone steps. Where are you going? Cried Annie. To warn the monks, Jack said. I'll come too, cried Annie, and she scrambled out of the treehouse window. Hurry, said Jack. Jack didn't even use the rope. He pulled himself up to the stone steep steps with his hands. As Jack and Annie climbed up the face of the cliff, clouds began to cover the sun. When they reached the top, a fog had almost hidden the serpent ships. Run! Cried Annie. The fog blanketed the whole island. Jack and Annie could hardly see the path to the monastery. When they arrived at the gate, the misty white world was silent. Vikings! Vikings! Cried Jack. The monks are still in the church, said Annie. She yelled and she yanked the bell rope. Dong! Dong! Jack and Annie watched as Brother Patrick and the other monks ran out of the church. The Vikings are coming! Jack shouted. Brother Patrick's rosy face turned white. Make haste, he said to the other monks, and gather the books and hide. The monks ran into the library, and Brother Patrick turned to Jack and Annie. We have a secret hiding place, a cave on the other side of the island, he said. You can come with us, but I am not certain that you will be safe. Don't worry, said Jack. We're going to try to go home. Do not use the steps, Brother Patrick said. The Vikings will climb them. Then, how do we get down from here, said Jack. Go that way, said Brother Patrick, pointing. At the cliff's edge are two large rocks. A path between these rocks will take you down to the shore. Then you can walk around to your boat. Thanks, said Annie. Be careful, said Brother Patrick, and he hurried inside the library. Wait, came a thin voice as Jack and Annie both turned to run. It was Brother Michael. He hobbled over to them, and holding out his book of Irish tales, he said, Here, take it. Are you sure? Jack asked. He knew that this was Brother Michael's life's work. Please, said Brother Michael. It is better that the world should have some of it than none at all, just in case. We'll take good care of it, said Jack. He gently placed the jeweled book in his leather bag. Good luck, said Annie. Annie and Jack waved goodbye to the old man, and then they raced to the rocks that Brother Patrick had told them all about. Chapter 7, Fog-Bound. At the rocks, the seagulls still screeched. Jack could barely see the steep path leading down into the fog. Go slowly, Jack whispered to Annie as they started to go down. Whoops, said Annie. She slipped and fell forward, bumping into Jack. My foot got caught in my stupid dress. Shh, said Jack. He held on to Annie, and they listened as pebbles and rocks rolled down the cliff. Jack took a deep breath. We've got to watch out for the Vikings, too, he whispered. They started down the steep path again, and they went one step at a time. The sound of the waves against the rocks grew louder. Finally, they stepped down onto a flat strip of pebbles. Where are we? Whispered Annie. I don't know, Jack said. Oh, look! She pointed to the shoreline. Through the fog rose the serpent prows of the Viking ships. Jack and Annie crept closer to the ships. Their sails were drawn. Each ship had been tied to a tall, jagged rock. They seemed deserted as they bobbled in the shallow waves. Jack really wanted to check out the ships, but he was afraid of wasting time. "We better find the treehouse," he said to Annie. They crept away from the 3 Viking ships, and suddenly they both froze. Through the mist, they saw a group of Viking warriors. The Vikings were looking at the top of the cliff. Their long yellow hair hung down from beneath their iron helmets. They carried round wooden shields and swords and axes. "It looks like they're planning to climb the cliff," Annie whispered. "We need to hide until they go," whispered Jack. "Then we can look for the treehouse." "Let's go hide in the ship," said Annie. "Good idea," said Jack. They both crept back to where the ships were tied. I don't know if I would think that was a very good place to go hide. Jack was happy to see the sides of the smallest ship were very low. They would easily be able to climb over them. "You go first," said Annie. Jack waded through the shallow water. It was cold. He reached the ship and he grabbed one side and he pushed himself up and onto the ship's deck. The ship jerked forward. Jack looked at the shore. It was now 30 feet away. The ship's anchor rope was pulled tight. The serpent prow bobbed up and down with the waves. The fog and the movement of the ship made Jack feel as if he were in a dream. For a moment, he forgot to even be scared of the Vikings. "This is so cool," he called. "Come on, Annie." Annie started to wade out to the ship when suddenly she disappeared. "Annie!" called Jack. Her head popped up out of the water and she splashed with her arms. It's deep," she gasped. "My dress is too heavy." "Use the rope," called Jack, "like when we climbed the stairs." Annie grabbed the rope that stretched from the ship to the shore. It held her weight as she began inching it along. "Hold on tight," Jack said. I am," gasped Annie. She kept going hand over hand along the rope toward the ship. When Annie got close to the ship, Jack reached out to help her. As he pulled her in, the side of the ship dipped down. Then the rope went slack and the Viking ship slid out to sea. Annie fell to the deck of the ship. Jack pulled the rope out of the water. The end of it was still tied in a loop. "What happened?" asked Annie. "We're headed out to sea," said Jack. "I guess all of the pulling lifted the rope off of the rock." Annie sat up and looked at the misty whiteness. "I can't even see the island," she said. "I can't see anything," said Jack. Annie looked over at Jack. "Do you think this is the darkest hour?" she asked. "I don't know," said Jack. "Maybe the book will help us." He pulled out their research book and he found a picture of a Viking ship and he read the caption aloud. Viking ships were the best ships of their times. When there was no wind, the crew could take down the sails and row with the oars. The smallest ship had 4 rowers and the largest had as many as 32, and the rowers sat on the boxes that stored their belongings. "Great," said Annie, jumping up. "This isn't our darkest hour." "Why do you say that?" Jack asked. "Well, there's still hope," said Annie. "We can row to the other side of the island and find our treehouse." "Are you nuts?" said Jack. "Please, Jack," said Annie. "Can we just try?" She grabbed one of the oars. She could barely lift it. "Forget it, Annie," said Jack. "It takes 4 big Viking guys to row this thing. You're too little. I'm too little." "Come on, Jack. Just try," said Annie. "You get an oar too. We'll sit on the boxes across from each other." "Oh, brother," said Jack. Annie dragged her long oar over to the storage box. "I'm not doing this alone," she said. Jack groaned. Then he dragged an oar to the other box across from Annie. "Cool," said Annie. She peered into a storage box. "Look, there's one for both of us." She lifted out 2 small Viking helmets. "Maybe these were made for Viking kids who sometimes ride in the ship," said Annie. "Maybe," said Jack. He hadn't thought of Vikings as real people before, people with families and little kids. Annie pulled off her scarf and put a helmet onto her head. "Now I feel like a Viking too," she said. "I bet it will help me row." She handed Jack a helmet. He put it on, and it did make him feel a little different. "I don't know about this," he said. The helmet wasn't as heavy as the one he had worn in the time of the castles, but it was still pretty heavy. "Well, I'm braver with mine on," said Annie. Jack smiled. He didn't know how Annie could be braver than she already was. "Ready to row?" she asked. "Yup," said Jack. He was feeling braver himself. The wind picked up as Jack lifted the heavy oar over the side of the ship. He lowered it into the water, but the current was so strong that the oar was ripped right from his hands. Jack fell over backward as his oar slipped out into the sea. "I lost my oar!" called Annie. Jack looked up as rain started to fall. The sky was black and a gush of seawater poured over the side of the ship. "Brrr," said Annie as she tried to stand. The black sky shook with thunder and flashed with lightning. Jack crawled to the side of the ship and he pulled himself up. Another huge wave was coming right toward them. "It's our darkest hour now," cried Annie. "Get Brother Michael's book." Jack reached into his leather bag. He pulled out the jeweled book and he held it up. "Save us, Story!" he cried. He looked at the sea again, and what he saw made him scream. Rising from the oncoming wave was a giant serpent. We'll stop right there. Tomorrow we'll read the rest of this book, chapter 9, and I believe 10 to finish to see what happens with Jack and Annie. Take care. Have a good night. Bye.